My name is George Myers. I'm the general manager here at Amherst Cinema, and I'm one of the programmers along with Luke Meyer in our Bellwether series, which tonight's film was a part of. Amherst Cinema is a 4-screen nonprofit. We're usually open for in-person screenings. We're showing on 300 films a year, along with special events like our Bellwether series. The Bellwether series is a film program where usually once a month we would have a filmmaker in person to unpack a film that we found particularly rewarding and challenging, and maybe is sort of pushing the boundaries of filmic conventions. And tonight's film certainly would fit that role. The series is sponsored in part by the National Endowment for Arts, so I want to acknowledge them along with all of our members and supporters. So if you are a member, we thank you, and if you're not, we encourage you to become one so films like this can continue to grace our screens, whether it's virtually or when the time comes in person. I'd now like to introduce Spencer. So a very impressive resume. So Spencer, please feel free to add anything if you'd like. But Spencer has over 3 decades of experience as an independent filmmaker. He won a National Emmy for AKA Don Bonus, which along with Refugee and tonight's film in the series, Kelly Loves Tony, makes up his trilogy about Southeast Asian youth. Nakasako is the founder of the groundbreaking media lab at the Vietnamese Youth Development Center in San Francisco's Tenderloin district, where he collaborated with youth from the neighborhood on filmmaking for over 17 years. Really, really impressive stretch of time there. He's currently a writer. He's currently a member of the Writers Guild of America, the Academy of Motion Picture Arts and Sciences, and a lecturer at UC Berkeley. I also want to acknowledge Sentient Art Film and the curators of the series, Keisha Knight and Abby Sun, the series My Sight is Aligned with Vision, which this film is a part of. You can visit sentientartfilm.com to find out more about that series. On the Amherst Cinema page, there is a coupon which will get you a discount to that whole series. And I do want to talk a little bit later, Spencer, about your work in the context of that series. But firstly, welcome. How are you doing?
I'm doing fine. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, it's a real pleasure. And for folks who are watching live via Facebook, I am monitoring the chat here to my right. So if you have questions you'd like to ask, I'll do my best to integrate those sort of seamlessly. Otherwise, we'll just put them off to the end and then get to them there. Okay. So Spencer, one of the questions I had was there is an article which is linked through an essay through the Sentient Art Film site that challenged the term collaborative filmmaking, which did really resonate with me on my initial watch of Kelly Loves Tony. But I was curious how you felt about that term and how you think of Kelly Loves Tony in particular as a collaborative film.
Mm-hmm. I think that maybe what I was sort of talking about, I sort of feel like, especially nowadays, the term collaborative is really overused. You know, it's like people are going out of their way to make sure that that there's inclusion. You know what I'm saying? Whether it be for race, whether it be for political reasons, whether it be for gender reasons, it's like my idea of collaboration was set up like from my earliest work, and you know, when I was a below the line grunt, the filmmakers that I work with were extremely collaborative and made you feel like you were part of the movie, not just a grip or not just a sound person, you know. So I kind of feel I guess one of the most shocking stories was I was like a second camera assistant on Wayne Wang's Dim Sum, and he showed a rough cut, and all these people were talking, you know, really some pretty powerful people, distributors, producer types, and you know, I'm like at the low end of the totem pole. And I went outside and I had a cigarette and I'm smoking. And then Wayne came out, I guess, to get some fresh air. And he asked me, "What do you think?" And I just like looked around like, "You're talking to me, right?" I mean, it was like an incredible honor, you know, and he actually cared. And he, you know, I may not, I think what I learned from that experience is he saw that I brought something to the table that these other people weren't. And he was curious about that. You know what I mean? And so I kind of feel like that's the, for me, true collaboration is you're seeking opinions, you're seeking attitude from people that can help you or can provide a different perspective or can, you know, make you look at your film in a completely different way. So for me, I don't think I could have been nearly as successful without collaboration on many different levels.
So that's interesting because that's before you were really making films as a director or producer. And
Yes.
so,
Yeah.
so it wasn't necessarily your upbringing or education that would have led you there, because you had entered into the film world without thinking that that was an essential part of finishing a film.
Yeah. Well, when I first started, you know, filmmaking was clearly hierarchical, right? I mean, and elitist because it was primarily film, so it was super expensive. I mean, you had to have money or you had to have some kind of connection. A lot of the people that were actually producers and directors um, came from means, you know, or came from access to means. You know what I'm saying? And I'm a gardener's kid. You know what I mean? So I was just happy to work. Um, I was very, very fortunate to come up at a time when um, not just Asian Americans, but a lot of filmmakers of color were starting to kind of express themselves and tell their own stories, right? And so it was a very kind of influential time for me. And I think because everybody was sort of learning as they were going was one reason why people were so inclusive. Does that kind of make sense to you?
Yeah.
There were a lot of gatherings. There were a lot of times 15, 20 people in a room talking and just chopping it up. And it was a lot of it was raw. Like you would get called, you know, you would get called out. Um, and so it wasn't always supportive, you know. um, but it for me it was like a great time, you know what I mean? I don't want to sound nostalgic or like the good old days, but it was kind of this great time where um, we're kind of making it up as we went along, and I was one of the younger bloods in that crew. I want to be clear about you know there were clearly some OGs on top of me that were like where I learned a ton from.
Well, I'm going to jump actually ahead because of what you're mentioning here. But I was thinking about the idea of representation. I'm wondering what what your feelings were around representation, in particular of Southeast Asians,
Mhm.
in this sort of this early '90s or
Right.
a little bit later period. I'm wondering what your perspective was on that.
Yeah, I mean, you know, for me, you know, not to be like overly humble or anything, but I sort of feel like I was kind of at the right place at the right time in the 90s. You know, they um, kind of stumbling upon the refugee community, first in the Tenderloin, um, and then when Kelly Loves Tony's in East Oakland. But that they were like the 1-5 generation. In other words, sort of born in Southeast Asia but raised in the United States. So they had one foot in each culture. And then they were the first, right? They were the first to watch American television. They were the first to learn English. They were the first to eat McDonald's. They were, you know what I'm saying? Um, and so it was a really exciting time for me. And it was also kind of coming into conflict at the point of which Time Magazine had just published. So I think it was like one of the first time they had an Asian American on the cover of Time Magazine, but it was the model minority. You know what I'm saying? And they're basically telling everybody, "Hey, yo, you want to be good immigrants? Follow the Asians, man." You know what I mean? Like they shut up, they go to school, they get good grades, they go to college. And then here I am in the TL going, no, man.
Yeah, the Tenderloin was rough back then.
and you know, it doesn't seem like such a big deal now, but back then, I couldn't, you couldn't even convince other Asians that this world existed. You understand what I'm saying? It was very new. It was very fresh. It was like, and back then, like, gangs were big, right? That's the hardcore of Bloods and Crips and XIV, and the Asians fell right into that. You know what I'm saying? And so on a street culture level, it was like really exciting, really kind of, and there was a lot of intermixing. There was a lot of stuff that was kind of going on. And for me, it was just like, try to capture it.
So to the film, one of the things that strikes me is, while the film is shot primarily from Kelly and Tony's perspective, they're the ones primarily handling the camera. You did have, I think your fingerprint is on it as it being put together.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm wondering, for anybody that's ever taught or been in front of a classroom of kids or had to prove themselves to like teenagers, it is incredibly humbling, bordering on humiliating, getting kids to
Yeah.
trust you and listen to you.
Mm-hmm.
I'm wondering how you manage that, and especially in the context you just gave of what youth life was like at that time. I'm wondering
Right.
how you managed to build those relationships and to I don't want to put words in your mouth, but to act as a mentor or to help bring this film and this story to life.
I think there's a couple things, right? Like, number one was, uh, it's hard to imagine today, but the technology was so fresh. Okay, the idea of a kid like owning a camera, being able to hold the camera, being able to shoot, that was huge. Back then those cameras were $1,200. You know what I mean? They weren't cheap, right? And so not everybody had an iPhone. Not everybody had a video camera. Not everybody, you know what I mean? Most of those cameras were kind of those clunky big VHS cameras, right? And so this was kind of the cool high eight. So the idea of carrying a camera, I'm not going to lie, was kind of a big deal. And what was interesting to me about it was watching how they responded to it. It wasn't like me. I would sit there and I would open up the manual and look at, if I got something and, no, so here's what you do. They don't give a shit about no manual, right? I mean, half of them can't even read, right? So they just like get the camera and go out and they just start shooting, and that to me was a kind of an eye opener of how they were sort of viewing the world. With Kelly Loves Tony, I had to change up. And the reason being is that it was two people. And before, with Don Bonus, I had just worked with one. And what was really fascinating with Kelly Loves Tony was Tony did not, like, he just loved having the camera and shooting. And he very seldom could comment. He very seldom talked to the camera, but he just liked shooting. And if he talked while he was shooting. Kelly, when I first met her, clearly she saw AKA Don Bonus, and she understood this whole talking to camera thing because she kept a diary in real life. She actually brought it out and showed it to me when she met. And she said, "Oh, I get this. Instead of writing, you just talk to the camera." And so what was a difficult thing dealing with the film language on Kelly Loves Tony is, if you really look at it, most of the verite is Tony, and most of Kelly is just, she's being shot or she's talking. So her guide track is from those monologues, right? Where she's talking directly. And so, but there's very few verite. And especially once she had a kid, she was like, "No, I'm not down for picking up the camera. I'm tired." You know what I mean? So it took us a while to kind of find how we were going to create the language for that.
That was actually one of the things I was going to ask about, was how you, or if there was a challenge in sort of mediating that relationship between them, and you know, you see a few issues of conflict between the two of them, and
Mhm.
wondering if there was a challenge on your part, and that with the end result of saying, hey, we have to come up with something that will give both sides of this story to complete the picture, and if their input on what was the sort of final outcome of, you know, a story arc was a difficult part for you.
Yeah, this one it was probably easier to talk to Kelly more about story. Tony was just much more day to day. You know, if he had his way, it would be about him and his homies. You know what I'm saying? We would just be, you know, um, um, but the clear, you know, if there is a you know, it's Kelly, right? Kelly's the one. It became very clear. She's the one with ambition. She's the one with the dream. She's the one, and I wanna really give huge props to um, a couple of people, but one is Debbie Lum, who uh, she was just in Sundance. She just had a Sundance film called Try Harder, but she was the editor on this film, and I forced her to become a producer, um, and I forced her because I saw that she had a good relationship with Kelly, and so that, I mean, I'm not stupid, you know what I'm saying? Like, you know, I just think their communication was better than me and Kelly. You know what I'm saying? And so that was huge. Um, and the other person that they both respected, crazy respect, is Dave Kakashiba. And he's the guy that Tony talks to. You know, he's the one that he's the runner. He runs East Bay Asian Youth Center, and that guy just has mad respect in Oakland, you know. And so it didn't matter whether it's Tony or Kelly. He carried a lot of weight with this project.
Um, so I saw Try Harder at Sundance this year, and I really loved it. And
Oh,
if
cool.
you're
Yeah, yeah.
if you're okay to talk about it for a minute, or if there's some parallels there where, you know, in Try Harder and in your film, there's this, um, there are these really rich stories, you know, of kids, of high school kids, high school age kids. Um, and then below the surface, and not so below the surface, there are these really, really challenging structural issues, you know, really, really punishing racism, you
Hmm.
know, a lot of really, really, really large scale problems.
Hmm.
But I
Hmm.
think in both films, they're sublimated. They're not chosen to be the focus, and
Hmm.
instead the kids' stories are sort of brought to the front and center. I'm wondering if you can talk about that, particularly with Kelly Loves Tony, but I know you do have a connection
Hmm.
to Try Harder.
Yeah, I mean,
For example, like
yeah,
Tony's court case. I mean, it's there,
right.
and you really could have gone much deeper into what was going on there, but it takes a back seat for how dramatic it is.
Right, right. It's um so a lot of times when I write, like, there's a reason why I don't want to write proposals anymore, because I'm kind of sick of them. You know what I'm saying? Like, people, I think when you hang in a community or you hang in a place for a while, you get, what I try to do is not guide it necessarily toward the dramatic, but guide it toward the reality. You know, I mean, what you saw with Tony in his court case is about as engaged as he gets. You know, like, if it was like a TV show or something, right? It would be, dude, yeah, you know, like Law and Order, you know, no, 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 you know. And life is not like that. Life is like, you know, oh, Tony, you got a fucking court case tomorrow. Oh yeah. You know what I'm saying? It's like it's there's so much unexpected, right? There's so much, like, you would think, um that this is going to be the drama in their lives, and it really isn't. There are other things that shape it. Um, and for me, and you know, I've worked with Debbie for a long time. She also edited AKA Don Bonus. Um, we kind of look for like the hidden, you know, the nuggets, the stuff that like is the truth behind things that really get it sort of going. You know what I mean? But you're right. I mean, there's been a number of funders that are like, wow, why didn't you go down this road? Or why didn't you pick up on that racial issue? Like, you know, the whole thing between Asians and blacks, right? Like, why didn't you, Spencer, go interview the African American community to find out why they don't, what their beef is with? It's like, you watch the movie, man. I mean, I'm not, you know, but that to them, that's what they're compelled about. That's what the, you know, and it's not, you know, if you look at Tony's life, or you look at Kelly's life, or a lot of these kids, they're not consumed with race 24/7. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, and
Not
that
that it's
actually,
not important. Not that it's not important, you know, but
yeah, and I was wondering, sort of tying that to representation, that it, and your conversation about you know, challenging that idea of collaborative filmmaking, that
mhm,
filmmaking exists in a commercial sphere, and
mhm,
there are going to be outside forces that are trying to control the narrative of your film
right.
by allowing or withholding funding.
Mhm,
And I'm wondering if, thinking about this time where Asian representation is limited, and when it is, it's this model minority trope, which
mhm,
we look at now as, I mean, it's disparaging. You know, we were really critical of it, but at that time, it was just an okay thing to say.
right.
I'm wondering if that was that idea of representation, like, well, Asian Americans don't get enough screen time, and this film is the one that's going to end up on PBS. Wondering if that was the end part of the film was in your mind when you were working on them.
Yeah, you know, one of the positives and negatives, you know, like I worked in the community for a long time, you know, over 15 years in the Tenderloin. Um, you get attached, you know, you know what I'm saying? It's like, and not that I wanted to, I never was interested in being a spokesperson, but I kind of felt like I had a responsibility, right? I had a responsibility to tell the story. And not only there are a number of films that we produced in that community that's never seen the light of day. You know, we've done graduation videos, we've done wedding videos, we've done film basketball games, we've filmed, you know, it's like there's a whole thing that I think a lot of filmmakers, when they talk about giving back to the community, I really wonder if they understand what that means. You know, it means like being in that community and seeing what the need is and what people want. And that it's like once people found out like we were housed at the Vietnamese Youth Development Center, they would be like, hey, you know, my daughter's getting married. Can you film the wedding? Yeah. You know what I'm saying? You know, I mean, I got better things to do on a Saturday, but yeah, you know, but that's how you can get a film made for real. You know what I'm saying? You know? Um, and so anyway, I think that I don't know what was the question again,
I was thinking about your awareness of the limited representation of Asian, of Southeast
oh
Asian
yeah,
Americans.
yeah. And for that one, I'll tell you a really interesting story. So I got um, the Center for Asian American Media, which back in the day was called NADA. When they first kind of thought this film had legs, they sent me to a national PBS conference. And the whole idea was to kind of show 10 minutes of a rough cut and try to get interest from programmers and see what that terrain might be at PBS, right? And so here I am in Orlando, Florida, at this huge thing, and I'm showing like a 10-minute cut, and it's actually the first 10 minutes of AKA Don Bonus, and it's dead silent after, right? And these are like station programmers and whatever. And after it's done, some guy comes and I guess he feels sorry for me because I'm such a loser, you know. And he goes, I just want to ask you a question. Have you ever heard of Betacam? And I was like, okay, yeah, I've heard of Betacam. And he goes, yeah, it's a much better format than what you're working with. And could I suggest going to film school? And I was like, oh, he thinks I shot this. He thinks he didn't get the film at all. You know what I'm saying? Like it just went over all these people's. And at that point, I have to say, I got pissed. And I was like, I didn't appreciate being talked down that way, especially by PBS people. You know what I mean? Making the most boring shit on earth. And I just, the way it was just sort of like dismissed. And at that point, I was like, I'm finishing this. You know what I'm saying? Like it just kind of set me into overdrive. So sometimes anger is pretty good. You know what I mean?
Yeah. So similarly, I mean, being motivated by detractors, I'm wondering the sort of the inverse at the Youth Development Center, and any other organizations you worked with,
Mhm.
if there was sort of a motivation from, or an encouragement from the kids themselves to, hey, make my film. And you mentioned this stuff about some of sort of the major events in people's lives, but I'm wondering if there was a relationship you had where people were coming to you and saying, hey, I want you to film this on me, or
Mhm.
if there were films that were, the origins came from those kids.
Yeah, I mean, almost everything that we have done has come out of a workshop. So hold on one second. Yeah, so it's like I used to every summer I used to run a workshop with probably anywhere from 10 to 20 kids. And usually our film ideas kind of came out of that. So even Don Bonus, it came out of that because he was a student. The third film that I made, Refugee, that came out of the same kind of thing. It comes out of our experimenting. Kelly Loves Tony. Kelly did not come to a workshop. Tony did though. Um, but it was a little bit awkward because he was a lot older than the other kids in the class. You know what I mean? It wasn't that organic. And it was also, that one was actually spurred by Dave Kakashiba, that whole idea. The way that film came about was Dave had come to a screening of AKA Don Bonus, and he was waiting for me outside after it was done, and I was like scared because I thought he was waiting for me to tell me he hated it. Uh, but he actually liked it, and he said it was really simple. It's like, you want to do another one? And I said, sure. And so then, I mean, in like, I think the end of the week, he introduced me to Tony, and Tony, we met at actually Kelly's house, and Kelly made lunch for us. And then, yeah.
So just to switch gears a little bit, one of the things I actually just skipped it, but I was wondering about talking about sort of those high drama moments. I was wondering about the sort of the opposite of that is there's this very real stress that Kelly expresses about her place in Tony's family. And
Mhm.
I was wondering if there was any sensitivity on your part about asking someone to carry a camera or to be even thinking about filming, when it's like, yeah, I have kids, I have like a mother or a soon-to-be mother-in-law, all these
Mhm.
challenges she was dealing with. Uh,
Right.
how, as sort of someone removed from that filmmaking process, how you negotiated that?
Yeah, that one, it's really interesting. I actually think that was Kelly's outlet. I didn't have to, that one just, she kind of, I think that she was actually kind of feeling kind of isolated and alone. Her mom was actually not real supportive of her complaining. You know what I'm saying? Like, she's close to her mom, but her mom basically, when she complained to her mom would be like, hey, yo, that's life, man. You know what I'm saying? It's like, um, and so I actually think as it got more and more, we realized the footage was getting more and more and more intense. Um, and and I mean, to be honest with you, I was fascinated by that period. You know, just the whole thing with the bath and what the way that the mom talked to her and what her expectations were, and you know, the fact that she wanted to go to college was looked upon as as negative, you know. um, um, and you kind of sitting there going, do you, you know, in terms of Tony's parents, do you see like who has the potential in as this couple? You know, I mean, if you look at me and my wife, there's no doubt my wife has way more potential than me. You know what I mean? Like, so, you know, and so for people not to see that based off of culture, right? Based off the way that things are supposed to be, um, actually became pretty much a big part of the film.
And were you reviewing film like you would a shoot? So were you seeing some of this stuff in real time and processing that with them, or did you get kind of a big dump of film and then work through it with them?
Yeah, what we tried to kind of do was allow them to kind of have a rhythm and live their life, right? So usually it was a 1 week thing where they could go and shoot. So they would shoot, and then we do the pickup, and then Debbie and I review the footage, and then what we then usually did was, you know, get a meal, you know, have a meal, talk over dinner or lunch about what we saw, what maybe more they could get, et cetera, et cetera. Yeah. But it was pretty much weekly.
And there is a comment from Ashley that says Spencer is awesome in anger. So let it out.
Okay.
And if there was anyone else that has questions in the chat, please chime in. And one other thing, this is a little bit of a diversion here, but you know, one of the, you did mention it. One of the things I was thinking about was you having a relationship and a perceived way of helping kids process this film and the filmmaking seems significant to me. And thinking now about kids having smartphones and really sophisticated tools at their
Sure.
disposal, I'm wondering how you've seen that change storytelling and how you know, mentorship and guidance from someone like you
Mhm.
has changed with the technology, the development of technology.
Yeah, you know, I can say that a couple of people have asked me whether I would do kind of like a master class video diary thing, you know. And I don't, you know, it's not like I don't wanna. I'm not sure I would be very effective. I What's interesting to me is I actually think the technology had a lot to do with it. Um, it gave me a little bit of like authority, right? Like I knew more than you know what I mean. Like there's a little bit of like people, and it's not like I'm a boss, but it's like it's like in any relationship, it's like what can you do for me and what can I do for you? You know what I'm saying? It's like that's the whole notion of collaboration, right? People are curious, and so the people that were coming around, the kids that were coming around, they were curious. They wanted to kind of explore things, and I'm finding stuff with the cell phone and a lot of the youth today, they already know it. You know, they know the iPhone, they know all the editing programs, they're already editing before they're showing anything raw, right? And that's the total opposite of me, right? It's like no, 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 we don't edit nothing. You know, we look, we watch, we I want to see all the nuance, I want to see. So I feel like now there's also sort of a rush to kind of get, you know, push forward. And a lot of my students, when I was teaching at Berkeley, they'll have their subjects filmed with cell phones, and so the way that it's cut in is also quite different from my work. It's more like just treated like a B camera or a C camera. It's not really like subjective. And so some of the film language today with the cell phones, I don't even really understand it. Like they're using subjective camera in an observational film, really? I don't like, but nobody questions it, I think, because of the way that technology is today.
Yeah, there's an interesting shift that, there used to be this sense of when a camera's on, you're going to change the way you behave, and
Hmm.
and I think that even you see that in Kelly Loves Tony. There is
Hmm.
a conversation happening where Tony's talking to Kelly, but he's filming it, so it's clearly not him just trying to exchange ideas.
Right,
But now
right.
we live in a world that is constant. There's not a time where you're not being filmed. I think the default setting for us now is
Right.
we're being captured.
Hmm.
Um,
Hmm.
yeah.
Yeah, and I'm not sure, like I'm not, I don't, I kind of don't know how to teach in that environment. You know what I'm saying? Where it's very, the mindset is very different today, I think. Yeah.
So I have one last question here. So I would encourage folks if they had something to get into the chat, please do it now.
Mhm.
But I was wondering about the series that you're a part of here. My site is Line with Vision, that Abby and Keisha put together. And
Mhm.
I'm wondering just how you see the film. I'm not sure how familiar you are with the other films in the series, but how you see the film now, looking back on it, in a context of filmmaking at that time, maybe in your work specifically or in the field. You mentioned this really, I think, compelling anecdote there where you said people would sometimes be at each other's throats and calling each other
Mhm.
out.
Mhm.
So having a little distance from that now, I'm wondering how you see the film.
Yeah, well, I think what's interesting is back then, and when Abby and Keisha putting this thing together, back then, if you take a look at particularly the Asian American filmmakers, our films are nothing like, they're pretty diverse, they're pretty different. I mean, Roddy Bagawa and I are night and day. John Morisugu and I are night and day. I mean, we hung with different cliques, I mean, and I remember back then, uh, John Morisugu, Greg Araki, and I think Roddy was involved with it. They actually went to the Center for Asian American Media and said, you're not funding us, you're funding PBS, because basically the funding came for CAM's existence was from the Corporation for Public Broadcasting. So consequently, they wanted, programming for that. But then they called themselves an Asian American organization, right? And so you have these experimental filmmakers, or these, like, I mean, they were making some pretty raw stuff back then, right? And to go to the institution and say, what about us? you know and then I was kind of looking at it back then, and I was like, yeah, what about them? I mean, you know what I'm saying? Like, if we just do PBS documentaries, it's boring, right? Is that the kind of community? Is that what we want to be? And I kind of feel like that's what was exciting for me then, is just this mixing it up, and meeting Roddy or John at a thing, and they're saying, man, we like what you're doing, and I'm like, yeah, I like what you know what I mean? It was like, it was cool. And now I kind of feel like it's kind of tame. It's sort of, the documentaries hang out with the documentarians, and the experimental, they hang out in the museums, and you know what I'm saying? And the narratives, it's like, we're all a community. And I think what was cool with what Keisha and them are trying to do is basically say, these are different points of view of a community. And I think that that's the important thing, is to sort of show the diversity of community. I'm not sure we're doing a great job at that right now. There's a million films out there, but they all seem to kind of have similar notes, you know, and I would love to kind of just see things that are mixed up and chopped up and, you know, yeah.
Yeah, I think that's absolutely right. I haven't seen the full series yet, but what I have, I think, really makes up the type of histories I'm interested in, which are, a multiplicity of views combining to make sort of a single horizon. And yeah, this
Yeah.
series that we're doing, Bellwether, I think your film is such a good fit because we are looking for films that are challenging and are moving between form. I think your film has some elements of experimental cinema in it, some traditional, narrative doc, but also really, I think, really compelling and unique forms
Well,
to
and
it.
if you just stay with a certain click, then you don't learn anything, right? You know what I'm saying? Like, to kind of talk and share ideas with people who are not making the same kinds of films you're making, I think is really, really important. You know what I mean?
Do you see as a lecturer uh, a motivation on the part of students? I have a nephew and he's 18, and
Mhm.
that age group, there's this sort of, I want to be a YouTube personality. Like, there's a very different motivation. I'm wondering how if you see filmmakers in your classes, if you're getting a sense of what their longer term vision is for their work.
Yeah, you know what's a little bit sad to me, I think, uh, is I mean, is the this new generation seems to get the businessy side down. They seem to kind of have goals very early at a very young age, and what they want their film to do, or they want it to be an entry level film to something else, or they want to sell it to the New York Times. I mean, you know what I'm saying? I kind of feel like, when the reason why I kept making films is because of the feeling when I finished my first one. I had no idea where it was going to go. It's just like great. It was just like a great feeling. And that's what when I started working in the Tenderloin, that's what I would look for. I would see kids make the shittiest movie on earth, the worst film ever. And they're sitting there and they're watching and they're smiling and they're laughing and you know what I mean? It doesn't matter,
Yeah.
And I think that, at I mean, not all of the students, but at UC Berkeley, as time kind of went on, I saw more people more driven toward, and rightfully so. They're in debt, they owe money, blah 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 blah. But that joy, I think, I miss that. You know what I'm saying? That makes the price of admission worth it when you're working with anybody. You know what I'm saying? Yeah.
Yeah, there's that yeah, I'm incensed so regularly when you read about creators of music or anything, and they were just always ripped off. They were always ripped off, especially people of color, especially women, anyone that wasn't a white, like you said, people of means or with access to means, they ripped everyone off. So that's really infuriating. But on the inverse, that sort of corrupting um, influence of money preceding someone's desire to make feels also as a new form of problematic relationship to money in film, or
Right.
art.
I mean, and it would be really interesting to just ask people and get an honest answer, like, why do you really want to make this film? Why? You know, and other than the bullshit answer, you know what I'm saying? Like, and it's, like, one of the things is I would tell the kids is like, describe your film in one sentence, and that's where you really get the truth. You know what I'm saying? It's like, it could just be because he's a nice guy. I there was this one girl that actually made this film called The Seven of Us, and she's only 16 years old, Chinese Vietnamese girl. And this film eventually got picked up by HBO. Um, and I said, the seven of us, it was about her and six of her best friends. I said, why do you want to make this? And she goes, because everybody thinks we're hoes and I want to show them we're not. Good film. You know what I mean? It's like,
Wow.
um,
Well, that was all I have, and I do want to, we're nearing an hour here, so I don't want to keep it too long. But Spencer, it's been a really, really wonderful conversation. And again, I want to encourage people, if you check out the film page for amherstcinema.org, there's a link to the full series at sentientartfilm.com. If you haven't seen the film, you can see that through amherstcinema.org now. And if you have, I encourage you to check out the entire series. Spencer, it's been such a pleasure to talk with you. And I'm also honored that you said this is something like your fourth or fifth Zoom call.
Yeah.
So,
That was great. Thank you very much. I really appreciate it.
That's going to go in my bio, as I was one of Spencer's 5 Zoom calls in quarantine. Yeah, thank you so much, Ryan. I do want to ask, is there a way people can keep up with your work? We mentioned Try Harder, which just is in festival now.
Right.
But where people can keep up with you and what you're doing.
I'm kind of, to be honest with you, I'm sort of like trying to kind of figure out Act 3. And so I'm kind of, I don't want to say I haven't made a film in a while, so I'm not, I was kind of dabbling with scripts and stuff with some other younger guys that I was working with back in the day, and they ended up kind of not going. We got deals, but they didn't get made. So it's kind of like I'm just trying to kind of figure out what's next in this world. You know what I'm saying? So there's not much to follow,
Well, it's a time where I think we're all trying to figure out what's next. So, you're in good company, because I don't think any of us know.
Anyway, thank you very much.
Yeah, whatever comes next, I look forward to it. And I thank you for joining us today.
Yeah, and thanks for existing. I mean,
that's the least I could do.
Okay, take care. All right.
Take care.
Okay.
Bye-bye.